Clear, welcome to the podcast. What a great honour it is to you're easily the most prolific writer we've had on so far.
I don't know about that. The most tired writer you've had on so far.
The most tired writer. It's all the artists I meet at the moment are very tired. I think it's got something to do with not only artists nowadays cram their professional work in with their lives in a way that like lots of other people don't seem to have to do. Everything's sort of a bit of a tapestry of life.
It is.
And
yeah.
Add the heat to that and it's just completely wiped everybody out.
It's wiped out all my brain cells, the heat has, and running around after the kids and going to their various events and stuff. So I've just come back from Belfast, watching our eldest daughter run for Wales in the 300 metres and the relay team. And it's just been actually amazing to watch athletes perform, because I think what they do is kind of incredible compared to writing, where you're just sitting there slumped at your desk and trying to, push one word after the other out of your brain. They've got to just focus and compose themselves and just go. And they're running their own race. I really admire that. So I've never been late. I never will be, but it makes me think I want to go back in time and try and be one.
I've always been quite interested in writers who are fascinated by sport. I mean, in America, I would be called a sports fan, right? But I watch cricket and the football and the rugby and snooker. Weirdly, a bit of an outlier. But I've always been interested in writers who find fascination in sports, because I think, you've just kind of tongue in cheek expressed it a little bit there. A slight feeling of inadequacy in what we do compared to what physical athletes do. Our mental athleticism is just not enough for us.
Yeah, we can sort of tell ourselves that we're, fit in other ways, but I don't know, like what they're doing is so impressive. But I've never been interested in sport, like ever. I was the kid who would do anything to get out of sports lessons, I used to get the art teacher to write notes for me saying that I was helping out in the dark room, which teachers probably wouldn't be allowed to write now these days. But I would just do anything to get out doing anything physical, because I was so rubbish at it. So I'm just in awe of young people these days. They found sport, they love it. Football is another part of our family life now, because both the girls play football. It's quite high level, so I'm always going to games, either games or athletics events, and it's fascinating to me. With football you've got this whole like narrative, and at least if you've driven your child somewhere for a game that lasts an hour and a half, and you've been in the car for 4 hours, it's kind of worth it, even if they lose. But you drive someone to run 60 meters and it's over in less than 10 seconds, which is just like, wow, we've come a long way for that. But, it's all about getting your stat, power of 10, where are you on the list? It's, but yeah, I admire the fact that they can do things that I could never do. And when Becca was born, the eldest, I wrote a song just kind of telling her to follow her own path and do what you want to do. Although maybe I secretly thought, maybe she'll, but she'll be creative. And like following her own path has meant actually literally it's an athletics track that I'm just watching her go round and round. It's, it's funny how your kids can, be completely different to you. And that's kind of exciting in itself. So I did write a little bit about, athletics in The House of Water. Actually, there was one character in that was he was a runner, and I wouldn't have done that apart from the fact that I've been spending so much time just watching athletes. So sport has become my life, which is interesting for a very unsporty person.
You did not see that coming, I suppose.
No, I didn't see it coming at all.
But there's something, I come from a sort of sporty family, sporty background, and I suppose writing and art and all that kind of stuff took over at some point, and I stopped playing, and I stopped playing everything, and every given moment was just like sat at a desk trying to write something, trying to get something written down. But there's something, isn't it, about the story of a sporting event, about the drama and the story that I think always draws writers to them. I mean, even from that slightly nerdy aesthetic sense that you're kind of, I'm always fascinated by the stories of things. Like, I assume the World Cup has been quite big in your house if it's quite a boring house. But watching that, like the complexity of wanting Messi to do well because you appreciating true greatness in any field, and you think, well, I want Messi to do well because of the story of Messi winning back World Cups and winning his last. But then, of course, he plays in the team that is traditionally the villain and was the villain in the final as well. You know, a team of villains, of cheats and violence and backstabbers, and
I know, it was quite interesting. At the end of that game, it was all kicking off and, Argentina just going a bit nuts and starting to actually attack the Spain players. And Messi's just like sitting there, just like the eye of the storm with a camera on him, taking it all in. And I do find those narratives really fascinating. I find football personalities interesting. The different coaches, bad cop, good cop, what they get out of the team, supporters, watching supporters go nuts at a kids game when it's just like, this is not the World Cup, guys. Let's all calm down.
You see a lot of that, do you?
Yeah, but I'm there just like watching, kind of excitedly thinking, I could write something about this. But the thing is, my technical knowledge is like zero. So I'm not the supporter who can shout anything out or coach from, the touchline, because I wouldn't know what to tell them to do anyway. But it's odd how I've ended up kind of talking so much about sport already in this podcast. Because it's just sort of, I never would have foreseen that would have been something that would be of interest to me, but I actually see the value in it as well, especially for kids these days, I guess, because of the, social media and the screens and the fact that we're also worried about our kids having these sort of digital lives. So in some ways, I think sport saves a lot of kids because they're out there doing it, training, playing together. It's all about play. That's what I actually love about team sport, is they're still playing, even as they grow older. That sort of the imagination it takes also to play a football game and make creative decisions. It's all there. And we're all in the outdoors. And I probably have spent more time in the outdoors because of this than I would have done otherwise. So it's probably been good for me as well.
Wales Arts Review is back, and it's a podcast. Or rather, the new Wales Arts Review is being built before your very eyes around the central column of my conversations with some of the most interesting and vital cultural figures working today. But for us to survive and grow this time, we very much need your help. If you like what we're doing, like what we stand for, then like our posts, and most importantly, subscribe. The more subscribers to our Substack newsletter and YouTube channel, the better placed we will be to grow and pay writers to tackle the most pressing cultural subjects of the day. Via Substack, you can become a paid subscriber and gain access to exclusive content and an ever-growing Wales Arts Review archive. And by hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, not only do you let the platform know you'd like to see more of our stuff, but you increase the chances of us drawing down revenue from ads. All that goes back into Wales Arts Review to help us grow and improve. We need your support. Press those buttons and then go and enjoy our stuff. It's all for you anyway.
I was a couple of weeks ago. I was driving. I was in North Devon, and I was driving down. It was like an A road or something, but it went over a bridge and through these fields, and down. I just saw the corner of my eye down by the river. There was like this old, dilapidated barn, and there was a bunch of kids playing around it by the river. And I just had this really sort of quite profound, nostalgic moment of, oh yeah, that's the sort of thing that I used to do when I was a kid. That's the sort of thing that kids used to do. It was a bit of a Stand By Me moment, I have to admit. But and all those kids probably died that afternoon. They probably all fell through a roof or something, or into an abandoned mine or something. But for a brief second there was just like this moment of, I just thought it just, the sun was kind of setting. It was a sort of golden hue across the field. And it just felt like a moment that felt sort of nostalgic, but also a little bit alien, the sort of thing you don't see anymore.
I grew up in the countryside and we were always out playing, and yeah, I kind of hanker after that as well. But I do see my kids doing that more and more through these activities, which is great, but it's a strange age we're living in. But whatever can get them outside, really, I think is fantastic for their mental health. That's kind of how you want them to develop, really. So long may it continue, really. I don't, if they wanted to give it all up now, I'd be kind of devastated.
Do you feel there's anything, I mean, it's a dangerous question, isn't it? But do you feel there's anything sort of bubbling away in the recesses of your mind about the drama of sport, and that it would be a good arena for
I think there is.
Yeah.
But the problem is, like, I keep seeing other people getting there first. So, like Amandaland, for example, I've been watching recently. I don't know if you've seen the spin-off of Motherland.
Yeah, I have. I've seen a few episodes here.
But there's a mixed football team of teenagers in that, and it's quite funny because it's not about the game at all. It's just about the parents standing around and Amanda walking across the pitch, not realizing she's not meant to be there and being hit by a ball. And then I've been watching this other series on Apple TV, Maximum Pleasure Guaranteed. And
I've started watching that.
Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And she ends up being a football coach to a bunch of like 6-year-olds, even though she has no technical expertise. And I was like, oh God, I would have loved to have written that, actually, because me as a football coach would be quite funny with my very limited knowledge and experience. So I don't know if there's still a chance of like shoehorning it in somewhere into a series. I probably will get there eventually.
Yeah. I do. And I love the sort of the plot point in that series that you put the character into a very awkward situation because she's trying to improve her report for her child custody case, isn't she?
Yeah.
So she's getting more involved in the community, and of course it's a part of an entanglement of things that are making her more and more strung out, really.
Well, it's fantastic because it's obviously quite heightened and very dramatic what happens to her, but it's also quite relatable that she's like trying to get, sort out this chaotic situation she's in. And she's also got to text back this coach, Steve, from the football team she's never met. And she's on this WhatsApp group and she's got to do the kids' party. She's supposed to go to the art show at school. It's, that kind of chaos is relatable, I think. And it's very funny. And I think it's really well managed in that drama series that it does become actually quite realistic. Yeah.
Do you see, do you get ideas from situations like that? I was talking to one writer recently who was saying that his entire body of work really is about noticing something and thinking, well, what would that person do next? And that's where all the short stories come from. How do I get this character to here? Why would they do that? What would they do if that happened? And that's that. So seeing somebody on a bus or meeting somebody at a party and just sort of using them as a springboard, really. Do you take sort of ideas like that and think well, what if I put this character into this scenario? That would be an interesting place of drama.
Yeah, there are ideas everywhere, I think. And everyday life, you meet someone or you see a specific thing happening that you think could influence a certain story. I think that one example, I suppose, when I was writing a Llyfrgell, the original Library Suicides in Welsh, I remember just having this sense of a novel set in the National Library, and I kind of wasn't quite sure what it would be, but there was that sense of something dramatic happening for the characters who were caught up in this sort of dramatic story to start inside the library and end up on the roof. And I remember having that sort of distinct sense of I have no idea how we get from A to B. But that was very solidly sort of stuck in my mind as something to work towards. So sometimes I'll have that kind of inspiration where I'm like, right, I know where they start, I know where they end. Now we just need to figure out the worst bit to figure out, which is the rest of the story. But certainly there are kind of scenarios or ideas, or something, something that's said in dialogue, or something that a friend tells me that somebody else said in dialogue that, could spark an idea, especially for scripts. I'm always trying to find ways of finding the bizarre things that people say, finding ways of getting them into scripts and making them sound like they're part of that world. And that could spark something else as well.
Do you find yourself working? I mean, you write novels, you write screenplays, TV and film. Do you find when you get an idea, you know exactly where that idea is going to go? Like, oh, this be a good idea for a novel, or this feels like something that could go in a script.
Well, I think for me, screenwriting has kind of become the day job now. And so I'm kind of always working to a specific commission. And I can bring some ideas that I've had into that commission and make it work as part of the texture of that story. Whereas with novels and short stories, it's slightly different. I don't kind of know what form they'll end up in always. I think with novels, it's kind of like the big idea, isn't it? That just won't let you go. That for me is the thing I have to write as the novel. It's the thing that keeps reoccurring and keeps sort of bashing away at your brain, going, you must write this. And you don't always have time to write it, or the inclination, or sometimes you don't even feel that you're capable of doing it justice. So you just have to leave it there. And then with short stories, I think that recently I've just written a short story for Radio 4 for their Short Works series. And this is a story I've been just thinking about for about 20 years. I wanted to write something set on Paris Mountain in Anglesey. And I've just been trying to find the right form for it. Oh, is it a film? Is it a novel? Actually, it's a 2,000-word short story that I've just written for Radio 4. And finally, I've got it down. But some things just sit in there for ages before they find their form. And sometimes it takes an actual commission and a blank page commission, like it is with Radio 4. They ask you, write short story. It can be set anywhere. And then finally you found your right moment for it. So yeah, they just kind of go round and round. And, whereas with script, it's very specific usually. It's either I'm adapting someone's novel or my own novel, or it's a specific brief I've been given. Sometimes actors bring ideas and then you kind of work with them to create something. So it varies, I think.
Is there a lot more sort of in the running sort of development work goes on with script work, where there's a lot more input from people who aren't writers?
Yes, yeah. So it's a lot more collaborative, and development, well, I'm sure any screenwriter will tell you, can be, quite hellish. There is a term there, development
hell. Yeah.
Which I've been in for about 10 years with some projects. And it's sort of, there are different stages. There are kind of a lot of novels that I have adapted. And I've written the pilot episode, and then it will go around commissioners, and then someone might say they want to make it, and then something else goes wrong. In the end, it doesn't get made. And the thing with adapting other people's novels is, of course, it's not your original material. You don't own the IP. So once that project is done, it's kind of like a job of work and it's done and you move on. Whereas I think with original things, I find them a lot more exciting to write because I can do anything I want and it's my voice. But they can also kind of get stuck with the production company for a really long period of time. If they end up being commissioned by one broadcaster, but the broadcaster doesn't make it, and then it goes to another one or a streamer, and then they end up turning it down. But then it ends up with a company, and then maybe we'll have a rethink and they might option another version of it. And, so there are things that kind of get stuck in the system, which can be quite frustrating, but you just sort of, that's what I mean, I guess, by it being kind of more of a day job, because I keep on moving on to then other script commissions. And I know that work is coming. And then I sort of do the fiction writing on the side, or when there's a kind of a convenient sort of gap between those projects.
You've been working on TV series as well, like other people's TV series.
Yeah, I did Trigger Point last year. So the one about the bomb disposal unit with Vicky McClure. And that was really interesting because it was sort of so action driven. and not my usual brand at all to write, learning all these acronyms about kind of, little kind of things to do with bombs and how to make explosives. And it was just totally different thing and completely out of my comfort zone. But at the same time, it's sort of reassuring when you're working as part of a team, because you're kind of being more of a workhorse in that situation.
How do you get involved in? How does something quite not in your comfort zone come along like that? Do they? Obviously, you had some success with your own work, and then they just kind of come along and go, "Hey, we're looking for somebody."
Yeah,
like this show.
You kind of develop relationships with kind of different producers over a period of time, really. And I think that particular company, Judd Mercurio's company, HTM, I'd been talking to them for a while about original stuff, and they'd read a couple of scripts that I'd written and they liked them, but they didn't have the space for them on their particular slate. But they did say, but if you're interested in working on this series, actually, we think tonally, I don't know why I think they thought tonally that I would fit Trigger Point, because I did try to get some little gags in there, a few little jokes, and actually,
did they not make it?
They just all got cut. This is very serious. This is explosives. No time for gags. Let's not dwell. But just there were a few little moments that were more tender in some ways, I think. And yeah, though, because it's just got to be so fast paced. And then you kind of learn to just have quite a thick skin about, okay, what they're cutting, what they're leaving out, and, not be precious about anything like that. Even with your own work, even editing stuff that I've done over the years for, S4C, I just had to let some things go that I sort of really wanted to keep. But you just got to work for the medium and realize that you're part of a massive team of people, and that there are all sorts of different stages of a certain scene making it to screen. And what was quite satisfying about the Library Suicides, the film version, was so many scenes got cut that I was then able to kind of put back into the English language fiction version of my novel, because I could sort of reclaim them and take ownership of them and think, actually, well, I can still put them in a novel. No one's going to, stop me from doing that. So it's the difference between actually being in complete control of your medium and being part of a collaborative team. So yeah, I enjoy doing both, but I have learned, my place in both those.
Being part of the big machinery of
the tiny little cog, I think, that I was in Trigger Point. Yeah.
Tell me about the process for the Library Suicides, because I don't know how usual it is for the adaptations to work that way.
No, it's a bit bonkers, really. So to have a novel come out, first of all, in Welsh, and then to have it made into a feature film, and then to have it made into an English language novel that's slightly different. It's a weird gestation period, really. And initially, I had thought of the library as like a feature film, because the inspiration for it was actually spending 3 months there when I was researching my PhD on R.S. Thomas, and probably not concentrating on that work at all, and just looking at the building and thinking, wow, you could really use this as a film set. And then a friend saying, yeah, you're never going to get the budget to make a film here. So writing the novel, and then people saying, oh, have you thought about making it a film? So I finally got to make the film. And it was that was kind of the most difficult, I think, of all the processes, was actually adapting a slightly offbeat dystopian sort of futuristic novel that had been set in 2020, which was kind of going to be this nightmarish time, which it was, but in a different way to the way I described it, and making it kind of a couple of years on. So some of the stuff, making it as a film a couple of years on, when it was already kind of dated, I guess, And then turning it into a psychological thriller that was not offbeat and was not kind of, well, it was had an offbeat tone, but it was not dystopian. It did not have the cast of thousands that the original novel had. It did not have people on the roof because they were going, no, but our budget is not going to cover people like falling off the roof and being shot at. So you're not having that, and having to really, really condense it and rethink it as a narrative. That took so many drafts, so many discussions with the director, Eros Lyn, and also this thing about the medium, the film medium needing a kind of a clear perspective. In a 90-minute film, you have to kind of have one distinct perspective that the audience will follow throughout the film, and however bonkers that perspective is, they have to kind of get behind it. And I was saying, oh, well, no, there are 3 or 4 characters really, with an equal part in the novel, but it had to be one. And then I sort of bargained for 2 because they're twins. And then because of that kind of a change in structure and shape, it became a very, very different film, to the point where I was so nervous at the premiere in the National Eisteddfod because I knew that some people have reread the novel coming into the film excitedly expecting to see this portrayed in the same way. And I had to make this speech about, oh, this is not an adaptation. This is more inspired by the original novel. And someone came up to me afterwards and said, oh, I think I prefer the novel. And, you're momentarily offended until you remember that that is also your work. So that's fine. And then it took years and years for me to actually think about writing the English language version of The Library Suicides. And I think there was something in my mind that said, oh, actually, I think it's still sort of topical. Lots of talk about library closures and how that would impact, culture and the Welsh language. And so it became, again, it was more of a faithful translation than I've done in the past with other works. But it was slightly different because it could not be set in 2020 because that had already passed and we'd had COVID, and it was like, I kept the dystopian feel of it, calling it the sort of the unnamed country and the neighbouring country. The denouement was slightly different in terms of, there was more of a twist about the resources like paper going to the neighbouring country and the unnamed country not allowed to keep their own paper and these sorts of things. So it was still something that was interesting to me and exciting to write. It didn't feel like, oh, I'm just doing a third version of this thing, because they're all quite different from one another. But I would not recommend this to anybody as a process, because by the end, you just don't want to see another library ever again. And I don't know if I'm banned from the National Library. Porters give me a bit of a weird look every now and then. But the porter is the anti-hero. He's quite cool.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. But you have fairly. I mean, I would assume it's a unique relationship with one of your works in that you've not only adapted it for screen and then almost readapted it for text, but through the languages as well.
Yeah, because the adaptation itself to screen is a translation in itself, isn't it? And, I remember thinking, oh, it's great. I don't have to, do this. I sort of thought when I made the film, I won't have to write it in English as well because they'll have the subtitles. So this is the version that is the compromise, that is the bilingual version in some ways. But because the story was so different, because I'd had to compromise quite a lot on how I made that story for film, I still felt that actually I've got things to say in English that are slightly different. So I went and did it again. Yeah.
Was it your decision? I mean, ultimately it was, obviously, but your decision to write the English version, or was that in conversations with publishers and your agent? Was it like I suppose what I'm asking is, were you just feeling the irresistible draw to do that and to kind of, well, hopefully put a punctuation mark at the end of The Library Suicides, or is there going to be a sequel or an updated version or another version? Is it something that's just going to linger in your in your mind for the rest of your career?
The reason I started doing it was because I'd been out of writing fiction for quite a long time. So I'd started working on a series. My first series for S4C, started working on that about 2014, 15. And I was very, very lucky that went to a second series, a third series. I did thrillers for S4C, 35 days, 35 hours, which led to Ram Gyadva. So actually, I was on a massive roll with the TV writing, and I was really lucky to have that sort of golden period of just going from one commission into the next, and having things greenlit every year. But once you're in production, it's so unforgiving. No one on the production team wants you going off and writing a novel. They sort of own you for that time, as they should, because you're responding to things being filmed on the day, rewriting scenes on the day, and actually having to deliver things so on time so that people can actually produce them. So I'd been out of writing fiction for almost a decade. And I actually started thinking, oh my God, am I ever going to write a novel again? I did have this sort of fear that I never would. And I really didn't know how to get started again. And I just, I would try and start a novel and I would just think, oh God, this is terrible. I just can't do it. But then translating A Llyfrgell into the Library of Suicide seemed like a way of just getting me writing again. So I think I started doing that as a kind of a translation without thinking too much about where it was going to go or whether I was going to finish it. But it was, it felt like a comfortable process because I didn't have to think what happens next. I could just have the book in front of me and kind of translate it, adapt it a little bit, have a bit of fun with the language, exploring it. I can't remember doing it kind of on holiday. Like it was sort of a little bit of a hobby in some ways because I was in production and that was quite intense. But this was sort of my secret project. And then I did finish it finally and showed it to my agent. And he was umming and ahhing for ages about this. Oh, I'm not sure if people are going to be interested in a translation. Maybe something original, have you got anything else? Well, no, I haven't because I haven't got time to do anything else. So that is sort of sat in the drawer for about a year until I started thinking, well, yeah, he's thinking maybe not, maybe the London publishers won't be interested in it. But I started thinking Welsh publishers might be. And then I told him I would maybe show it to a few Welsh publishers. At which point he said, okay, well, I'll show it to a couple of editors, crime editors at the same time. So two-pronged attack. Mm-hmm. And luckily, Hodder and Stoughton came back and they loved it and they offered a 2-book deal. So it was, and then it was like, oh God, okay. And we'll have to write another one after it. So it sort of kick-started something for me again. And there was this novel, The House of Water, that I'd sort of been dithering about. What is this? I'm not sure what it is. Am I ever going to finish it? And I definitely would not have finished it apart from that 2-book deal because I had to. So in some ways, this was the whole process that got me back into writing because I might not have started again, really. There was one other book, Lloer Ganiadau, a Welsh language memoir that I wrote about my sort of childhood in Ceredigion under the moon. It sort of translates as a bit of a moonnoir that I wrote as a companion piece to a show that we made about a female astronaut from the National Eisteddfod. So that had come out in 2020 and that sort of, I was happy that I'd managed to write something else in Welsh that was a different form, not done non-fiction before, and then those 2 novels followed. So that feels like sort of, I don't know, phase 2 of the fiction writing in some ways.
That's a fascinating trajectory though, isn't it? Because, I mean, I can understand how if you're deep in production and things are going well and one project sort of follows another, you've got the not just the fact that the money's better than it is in writing novels.
Yeah. There is that.
but the fact that you're working in a community of creatives, and it's not like sitting around with other writers sharing ideas. You're with technicians and actors and directors and so you're working as part of a team which has its own kind of allure, doesn't it? There's a slightly intoxicating environment to be in.
Yeah.
And yet you've sort of stumbled back into a happy place of writing fiction. I think that's a really interesting journey.
Yeah, it is because there's such different worlds, and in some ways I could have just let the fiction go and with, I'm a bit of a workhorse anyway. I kind of like having a boss who's telling me what to do, right? You got to finish this script and here are the notes. Okay, I'll just get back writing. And initially, I think, going back into fiction writing was then quite exposing, disorientating, because I was like, well, I'm not going to, I can't ring anybody to ask them, like, what do they think of this paragraph? Or should I keep going with this idea? Or what do I do next? What do I do next? I think I'd come out of the habit of that mentally because I've been working in production, like you say, in this team of people. It's very exciting to meet actors and be part of that team and bouncing ideas off each other. But I am pleased that I managed to claw my way back into it, because I started as a fiction writer and I've always wanted to, publish books. And hopefully I can keep doing both of them. And in a development phase, actually, that I've been in recently, that's actually been quite a good time to write fiction, because sometimes you are waiting for an answer on whether or not this script is going any further, and you don't hear from anybody for 6 months. Well, you don't want to be sort of sitting around just waiting in that period. So actually the development period, as much as it is development hell, it's sort of a fiction opportunity at the same time. And also, it sort of led me to doing radio drama as well, because I don't think I would have been sort of on their radar for like Limelight series, the podcast that I did, Mother Cover, where I'm not kind of known as a drama writer. And so actually I found sort of writing episodic drama for radio actually quite fun after working in TV as well. Because the whole process is gentler, really, and people are generally more patient with you in radio.
How do you find writing audio drama, other than it's gentler? Do you find because obviously, you work with a sort of different creative team in terms of audio creativity and sound effects and things, but it is a very different discipline, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a very different discipline. I was kind of shocked, I think, by how bad I was at the beginning, because I thought, 5-part drama, this is going to be a breeze. I've written 8 parts. I kind of felt like I knew the structure of it, and then, oh no, hang on, this is like they can't see anything that's going on. And then suddenly there are all sorts of like tricks that you start to learn about how you can not give too much exposition, even though they can't see the actors, but kind of suggest what is kind of going on there and the subtlety of it. The dialogue's got to be slightly different as well, but it still can't be on the nose either. So it just takes a bit of time to get into the rhythm of it. And I think at the beginning I was sort of thinking, oh yeah, I'll have this one long voiceover at the beginning where they'll meet the character and know her voice, but it kind of didn't really work that well, and I needed to find other ways of us hearing her voice. I think in the end we came up with the idea of the dictaphone, and she's talking into a dictaphone, and actually there's sort of like a flash forward to where she is now, and then we go back in time, and some kind of televisual kind of techniques there, but just applied slightly differently and rhythmically different as well. So it was a massive challenge. I halfway through, I was kind of like thinking, oh my God, have I really got a grasp on this? But that's where the producer and director of that drama were really, really helpful and really held my hand through the whole process. And they were just fantastic to learn from. And what's great actually about recording radio drama in that kind of series is that you can be there for the whole 5 days that they are actually recording. You can do the rewrites quickly on the spot. You can discuss with actors, whereas, a TV series, it's going on for about, 8 months. And some writers are on set every day, but I'm not that kind of writer. I kind of get a bit bored of set with TV after a while, and getting on the director's nerves probably, and just can we get her out now? And some people just have no idea who you are, which is hilarious, because they're like, who's the work experience girl? Why is she sitting in that chair? I think one of the camera guys, I think, asked me at the wrap party, what exactly did you do on this production? Oh, nothing much. Just wrote the whole thing. Oh, but yeah.
It's a constant. You're constantly evolving as a writer and pushing yourself out into new opportunity. But those come with great challenges, don't they? Writing different things. I wonder, one of the few things that I don't know that you've done is poetry, which I find. You come from a poetic family, as it were. Your mother's a famous poet, and you did your PhD on R.S. Thomas, and yet it seems to be the one. Maybe that's why, I don't know, but maybe
they put me off. They both put me off.
Dragged it out of you. But
yeah.
I was gonna ask if maybe your songwriting was the outlet for that, really. If you needed an outlet, I don't know.
Well, actually, I have written poetry. I in 1999, I won the literature medal at the Eisteddfod, and actually, look, poems.
Oh my goodness!
I know, shocking, isn't it?
Evidence.
There is
evidence of my bad research.
No, but the thing is, I've tried to keep it quiet because I remember I was doing this course as part of my degree. So I did an English degree at Aberystwyth, but you could do a couple of modules in other subjects. So I did Welsh creative writing. I wrote a couple of poems there, and they were all submitted for this competition, the Literature Medal. So you could submit short stories, poems. I was just like chucking everything in, hoping for the best. And when it actually came to kind of hearing the adjudication on stage, I was really shocked and slightly disappointed that they were going on about the poetry being, really good, and short stories are all right. Whereas I thought, oh no, but I'm a fiction writer. I wasn't prepared for them to say that they liked the poetry more. But yeah, I don't know why after that I didn't listen to the judges and went, no, I'm not writing poetry.
Well, that's interesting though. You knew then that you were not going to be. I mean, this isn't therapy, but you knew then. You knew then that you were not going to follow in your mother's footsteps, as it were.
Yeah.
Maybe
I don't know if I was consciously rebelling against her, or just that I found fiction more sort of exciting because I've always been interested in story and propulsive stories and cliffhangers, and I don't know, it just felt like it excited me more to think what was going to happen in the story rather than sort of pouring out my emotions in poetry, possibly. And then the R.S. Thomas thing is quite interesting as well because, it's bizarre that I was so obsessed with him, really, from my A-level days through to, writing a kind of doing my sort of third year project on him and then doing a PhD on him as well. I was the first recipient of the R.S. Thomas Award, and he died on the day I started it. I don't know if that's good omen.
Is that right? Wow.
Yeah. So I never met him, but I think it was something in the kind of the way that he expressed himself and the beauty, the lyricism of the language that I sort of fell in love with as a young writer. But actually in the PhD, I became more fascinated with him as this very contradictory character, his really unique relationship with bilingualism and how he sort of, turned against the English language at times. And he wrote a lot in Welsh, actually. Having learnt Welsh in his 30s, he wrote a lot of essays about the Welsh language and his unique relationship to it. And he was very problematic, So I think that he was a difficult character, and that sort of, and his difficulty in relating to kind of both languages and being caught between two cultures. I don't know if that was something that I related to, to my work in some ways, but I sort of followed that trail. And I do tend to say in all my events, actually, that I blame R.S. Thomas for everything that I've written since, because somehow the National Library obsession was caused by him, by me being there studying him, having a panic about writing my thesis, and, a series I wrote about a female vicar. Caris Eleri is very different to R.S. Thomas, but maybe there's a bit of studying R.S. as a vicar in there. I don't know. And yeah, there's even a sort of an epigraph of Drowning by R.S. Thomas at the beginning of The House of Water. So he's somehow weirdly there influencing every creative decision I make, even though I'm not particularly reading him anymore. Yeah, so I don't know. Poetry, but like you say, poetry I get it out my system in song. You're right. The part of me still wants to write lyrics, I think, yeah.
I just think it's interesting that you seem to have done everything you can to avoid just writing some poetry. Even to the point of like engaging with the ghost of Aris Thomas, but not writing any poetry since 1999.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I wonder what my mother will make of this on the podcast, but it is interesting. I mean, I grew up going to poetry events as well. Me and my brother being, dragged to all sorts of different poetry tours and stuff, and sitting there when we were too young to understand anything. Just maybe it's sort of deeply ingrained in me that I don't want to be doing poetry events.
Was there a lot of was growing up what's the best way of phrasing it? Was there a lot of poetry going around when you were growing up? Or I'm interested in at what point you sort of realized your future as a storyteller rather than even in your music. I mean, we were talking then about it possibly being a slight outlet for a poetic sensibility, but you're a storyteller in your music as well.
Yeah, I think that, growing up, I think that there was sort of a lot of cultural activity, I would say that. And, a lot of protesting. My parents were both activists. My dad was chairman of the Welsh Language Society. He was actually imprisoned for 6 months when I was a baby for his role in the campaign for a Welsh language television channel. And so there was a lot of activism, this idea that you kind of could not take Welsh for granted, that you had to fight for it. And then coupled with that, Eisteddfods every year, being really immersed in the culture, and then going to poetry events and gigs as well. So lots of music actually being listened to in the car on the way to places, and Welsh records. I remember this distinct thing of discovering there was English language music. It was kind of like, there's MTV. This is like, my friend Lori had MTV, and I thought it was the most exotic thing, going around to her house and watching like English language videos on MTV. Wow, because I'd sort of come from that culture that was very secure in my identity, I think, from an early age, and very secure in the culture and very comfortable in it. And because of the triumphs of the Welsh Language Society, the things that they achieved back then, it gave me sort of the freedom to engage with English in a completely different way, to actually not see it as this kind of having such colonial overtones. Actually, just when my mum and dad were growing up and they weren't like not really allowed to speak much Welsh at school and stuff, and so for us having a bilingual education and actually discovering English language literature, just seeing the richness of actually having bilingualism at our fingertips and being able to do whatever we wanted with it. And that's, that I'm greatly indebted to them and their generation actually for allowing us this freedom, because now you can see what you can do differently with English and how you can use it to talk about Welsh identity and the Welsh language. And so, music then sort of became part of my world as a teenager, always kind of singing at school and choirs and starting to play instruments, and because there's such a huge like Welsh language sort of gigging scene, it feels like anybody can do it. Anybody can be in a band. It feels like you're abnormal if you're not wanting to be in a Welsh language band and do a gig. Gigs were our way of kind of socialising, meeting new people, going to Cymdeithas yr Iaith gigs. We were allowed to go at an early age. It was fine. It's for the language. You can go and drink lager and lime because you go into a gig. So my athlete kids would think that was disgusting, that I was doing that at that age. At 15, what are you doing? You're wasting your life in a gig drinking a pint of lager, whereas they're, competing for Wales. So it's sort of interesting that music has already been there because it was part of the culture. It's part of the chapel upbringing. Before you're even conscious of what you're doing, you're standing in front of a congregation singing something or other. And so, they kind of all have sort of combined in some ways. And I think, I mean, thank God that I was kind of, still singing and publishing songs in Welsh, even though I haven't done for a while, but I am planning to do something. But my youngest daughter is now in a band called Penna Orenna, the Orange Heads, and it feels like their generation are doing it now. So I don't know if it's slightly uncool for me to try and join in with this because they've got their own thing going on, way cooler than I was, and they're all only 13. But yeah, I think it's a contribution to culture, I think. Writing your own original music and performing. And I think that that's kind of what's kind of thrilling about it for me and why I've always wanted to do it within that setting. Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer.
No. But when so when you the idea of discovering MTV in your, I mean, I remember because MTV was on satellite TV, wasn't it? And
it's really posh people had it.
Exactly. I think I had like a friend of a friend who obviously had to become a friend who had parents had satellite TV, had B Sky B or whatever it was called then. MTV was on there and they actually back in the days when they showed music videos before it was all like prank shows and all that. Yeah. But yeah, that was exotic to me to find somebody and who had MTV and to experience that. But for you, for it being sort of blossoming into the English language as well, was there a moment for that with literature as well?
Yeah, I think so, because
you studied English at university.
I studied English at university, and English was my favourite subject really at school, and was taught by Ceri Wyn-Jones, who is a renowned Welsh poet, and he wrote in Welsh creatively, and he taught us English at school, and so he was a bit of an inspiration, and discovering texts like, Wuthering Heights. We were all obsessed with Wuthering Heights, weren't we? I found it all very romantic, Heathcliff. And I love the poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins as well, like the intensity of the language and how vivid it was. And so, I was sort of falling in love with the texts that I was studying at A-level English way more than I was with A-level Welsh, because we were doing sort of stuff that was kind of a bit drier, and there was also some emphasis on grammar and things, and looking at Old Welsh, Mabinogion, Middle Welsh, reading Mabinogion in Middle Welsh. Exciting. I mean, I'm sure I've taken something from it, because I actually ended up writing one of the Mabinogion series for Seren Books. So I knew there was something still in there from that, but it was more mechanical. It was looking at Middle Welsh paragraph, and then you had to write it in sort of contemporary Welsh, and it was kind of, whereas with the English A-level syllabus, you were analysing, and you were kind of learning how to be critical, and there was more of a sort of flourish to the language that you were using. So I think that even then I kind of saw that there was a different path for me with English language writing, and I went to Aberystwyth originally to do joint honours in Welsh and in English. Again, came across the fact that we were going to have to do some linguistic stuff in Welsh, and that wasn't that into, and ended up just doing an English literature degree, but with those kind of modules in Welsh that were creative, because that's kind of how I still saw them at that point: English academic and then Welsh creative. So it took me a while, to find my English creative writing voice in a way.
Yeah, that's really. And do you find now? I mean, obviously, there's always the sort of indelicate matter of earning a living, which is never easy working in the arts, particularly as a writer. Do you ever feel that you're being pulled more towards more work in English now than in Welsh? And would you prefer it to be more balanced if that is the case?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've been thinking recently about the fact that I've been working a lot in English, and for the past maybe 2 or 3 years, almost like exclusively in English for different production companies, doing obviously Mother Cover and doing Radio 4 work. They're set in Wales, a lot of them, they have like a Welsh identity, but at the moment I'm not making much Welsh language work, which sort of bothers me. And I'm just kind of having a think now about how to get back to writing more in Welsh. And it will be interesting to see how my Welsh language creative voice has also developed or changed or been made worse by all this work I've been doing in English. I don't know, because I haven't gone back to doing it, because creating a bulk of work at the moment feels quite daunting with a lot of other stuff going on. Maybe this is my moment, Carrie, to become a Welsh language poet all over again. Maybe I'll just go full circle. I'm like, no, I just write poetry now, actually.
Just write poetry. It's an interesting point, though, isn't it? Because you don't, these things don't lock off your development as a Welsh language writer while you get on with English stuff. It's the same creative impulse. It's the same development. It's the same. It's the same craft. So, yeah, I mean, you're not learning things in your writing in English that do not apply to your writing in Welsh. So that's really interesting to go back to Welsh and find out what your voice is like in that language now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I haven't actually published a novel in Welsh. I don't think since Y Llyfrgell in 2009. So I had that non-fiction book, Llorganiadau, which had a sort of slightly different voice as it would as a memoir, and short story collection Awral y Cystadl, which is 2010. So, I'm due another one at some point. I just need to find the time to do it. But as I'm still in development hell, there might be time, because who knows if any of the millions of things I'm doing will actually even end up in production at the moment. So there might be time. Yeah.
Well, Fflio, thank you so much for talking to me. It's been really great to hear about all your work and all the reasons why you're not a poet.
You are an open mic with an audience of one.